There was a man whose name was a household word in the East. He was a wealthy landowner, possessing 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. He had many children, many servants, and immense wealth. Most importantly, God himself called him a man who was blameless and upright, one who fears God and shuns evil. Yet, in the midst of such a seemingly perfect life, disaster struck without warning. Overnight, everything changed. This man was Job. His story is one of the most soul-stirring, perplexing, and transformative accounts in the Bible regarding our understanding of suffering. The question arises, why must a man praised by God himself endure the deepest agony? What spiritual truth lies hidden behind this? To understand Job's story, we must first look at his heart. Job was not just wealthy, he was deeply devout. The Bible tells us that Job often offered sacrifices for his children, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This shows that Job was a father who constantly cared for his family's spiritual state, a man who truly feared God. His life was full of blessings. A harmonious family, a thriving business, and a widespread reputation. By the standards of the time, Job possessed everything good a person could have. However, there is a detail we cannot ignore. The opening of the book of Job pulls back a spiritual veil. In a heavenly meeting, Satan appeared before God. God asked Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." Then God pointed to Job and said, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Satan replied with a shocking challenge. "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." In other words, Satan was questioning the very foundation of Job's faith. He believed Job only feared God because of material blessings. God allowed the trial but set a limit. Very well. Then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself, do not lay a finger. Then, disasters struck like a chain reaction. First, the Sabeans attacked and carried off the oxen and donkeys. Next, the fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep. Then, the Chaldeans swept down and took the camels. Finally, the most fatal blow, a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the house where all his children were feasting. The house collapsed, and all of them were killed. In a single day, Job lost all his property and all his children. Each messenger was like a knife piercing his heart. But the trial was not over. Satan appeared before God again, saying, "Skin for skin, a man will give all he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." God allowed the test again, but with a boundary. He is in your hands, but you must spare his life. So, Satan afflicted Job with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Job sat among the ashes, scraping his skin with a piece of broken pottery to find any relief. In this moment of total brokenness, his wife said to him, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." Even his closest companion urged him to give up. But Job replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble. At this moment, Job's faith faced its most severe trial. Job's 3 friends heard of his misery and came from their own lands: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. When they saw him, they could hardly recognize him. They wept, tore their robes, and sat on the ground with him in silence for 7 days and nights. However, when they finally spoke, their comfort turned into accusations. Eliphaz said, "No innocent person suffers like this. You must have sinned." Bildad said, "God is just. If your children died, they were punished for their sins." Zophar said, "Your sin must be great. Your suffering is likely less than you deserve." They represented a rigid view of cause and effect, the belief that suffering always comes from sin. But Job maintained his innocence. He declared, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end, he will stand on the earth." Job's experience shattered their simple formulas. Let's think deeper about the meaning of this story. First, we must realize that suffering does not always come from sin. Job was a righteous man. His pain was a spiritual test. Second, suffering can be part of a spiritual warfare. Satan tries to destroy our faith through pain, while God allows the test to prove our faith is genuine. Third, suffering is an opportunity for growth. Job's faith shifted from being based on blessings to being based on God himself. Fourth, God's silence is also a test. Can we still believe in God when we cannot see or understand him? Finally, we must recognize God's sovereignty. Even in the darkest moments, God is still in control and sets the limits that evil cannot cross. At the end of the journey, God finally broke the silence, but he did not give a simple explanation. Instead, he answered with questions. "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation?" He asked. "Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt?" Through these questions, God showed that his wisdom far surpasses human understanding. The appearance of God was the answer Job truly needed. Job said, "My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes." Job's faith had moved from theory to experience. The story ends with restoration. Job's suffering ceased, and God blessed him twice as much as before. He was given 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. He had 7 more sons and 3 daughters, the most beautiful in the land. He lived to see 4 generations of his descendants. However, the true meaning was not the material restoration, but the deepening of his knowledge of God. He became a man who would not give up on God, even after losing everything. True faith is choosing to believe in God even when everything else is gone. Job's story gives us these revelations. Suffering is not always a punishment. It can be a test to deepen faith. In pain, we don't just need answers. We need an encounter with God. True faith is built on trust in God himself, not his blessings. Even when we don't understand his ways, we can trust his goodness. Suffering may change us, but it won't destroy us if our faith is real. So, when we face the storms of life, let us remember Job. Let us not be quick to judge or quick to give up. Instead, let us choose to persevere in faith and seek an encounter with the divine. For as Job eventually discovered, God's presence is more powerful than any explanation. Job's suffering is an invitation to each of us, an invitation to believe and to meet God in the midst of our own pain. If you are asking why, this story was told for you. Thank you for watching. If this video helped you, please like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next video.